You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
I'm Christy McCormick in Saratoga Springs, New York.
And I'm Kimmy Carlson in St. Louis, Missouri.
And you're listening to the Show Jumping Podcast, where we deliver at-home riding exercises to our listeners and chat with fellow horse enthusiasts about the world of show jumping.
You're listening to the Show Jumping Podcast, a fun and informative show for riders, owners, trainers, grooms, and fans of all levels.
Coming up on today's show, we have Krystal Wilt, a dressage trainer that is working out of a barn that I work out of here in Saratoga. And we have both been helping a student of mine with a horse that has needed some training from different pairs of eyes. Christina Tremarky's horse, actually, who was on our last pod. Before we get into our interview, a quick word for our title sponsor.
Relyne GI is a natural, long-term alternative that goes beyond masking symptoms. This unique blend of gut-friendly hyaluronan and wellness-boosting beta-glucan works with your horse's body to soothe and protect their digestive system. Unlike traditional therapies that can disrupt digestion and nutrient absorption, Relyne GI leaves your horse's natural balance intact. But don't take our word for it. Relyne GI is field tested by leading veterinarians and backed by peer-reviewed research, including a study by Dr. Nathan Slovis, showing it effectively reduces gastric ulcers in active horses. Plus, it's Clean Sport certified and safe for competition use. Head over to resolvet.com. That's RESOLVET.com and use code SJP at checkout for 10% off, linked in our show notes.
Krystal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Krystal, can you give us a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about what you're doing here in Saratoga?
Sure. So I actually grew up in the Adirondack Mountains in a very rural area with absolutely no horses. So it's a little wild that I ended up becoming a horse professional, but I just had the bug, begged for riding lessons and made it happen, worked for my lessons as a kid and rode through high school, was so excited to finally go to college and get to see the real world where there were actually horse people and I wouldn't have to drive multiple hours to just see horses.
And where did you go to school?
So I went to, my undergrad was at Relyne in Syracuse.
Okay.
And I worked super hard there to finish a semester early so that I could go be a working student. And I did that in South Dartmouth, Massachusetts with Gerd and Yvonne Zuder, who taught me an indescribable amount about the industry. My parents really were very supportive of my horse habit, but they did not want me to be a horse professional as my first choice. They wanted me to at least pursue another career that I could have as a backup because they just didn't feel like horses were an incredibly wise, secure decision for me to rely on.
Not bad advice, as we all know.
No, it was very, very good advice. And I really did not appreciate that advice at the time, but I do now. So I did my undergrad at Relyne, went and was a working student with Gerd and Yvonne for about 6 months in between when I finished my undergrad early and when my grad work was going to start. And then for grad school, I started with a career in public health, going for a doctorate, and I did some research on yeast cells and made it a couple months before I realized that was definitely not what I wanted to do with my life. I love the research. I love science. My undergrad degree is in biology, but I did not love working in a lab and really wanted to interact with people and living organisms that were more exciting than yeast. And then 8 years ago, I stopped teaching high school when my first son was born and took some time off to be a mom and grew my horse business. And then my horse business grew to the point that I didn't want to go back to teaching high school because horses are my passion and I can make my own schedule and my schedule is just, I work all the time instead of having set hours. So it's great.
You're in, the dressage world. For you and from your perspective, especially with having, this experience taking on students from other disciplines, what have you found, what do you wish more disciplines knew or used from dressage? What do you think some of the methods or some of the specific training techniques do you think would be either broadly helpful to other disciplines, or you found to be broadly helpful, or helpful to a specific discipline or type of horse or type of rider outside of dressage?
I have to actually, my very hardcore dressage students, maybe they won't listen to this because it's a show jumping podcast, but they will be mad to hear this, that probably some of the most rewarding lessons I teach are to people outside of our discipline. And I absolutely love teaching hunters and jumpers, because the great flat work, just, really good, proper horsemanship on the flat can completely change how their horse jumps. And it's so rewarding to work with them, and they're always a little bit scared to get involved with dressage because it seems really intense and far away from what they're focusing on. But as we get working through things, we're focusing on the basics, which honestly, even when I'm riding a Grand Prix horse, I'm focusing on basics. It's always basics. It's, straightness, it's relaxation, it's rhythm, and then it's, suppleness and elasticity, and teaching the horse how to use its body to be their absolute best that they typically can, while keeping them mentally happy. So it's applicable to absolutely every discipline. And I love working with hunter jumpers in particular, because we can really make a lot of progress improving the way their horse jumps through flat work exercises, getting them straighter, getting them to better understand their balance and their bends and their suppleness and, their half halts, so that they can be balanced. And then, over the course of a few weeks later, those riders have, come back to me just absolutely ecstatic that they have never had their horse jump so well. So I find it incredibly rewarding. I also work with quite a few eventers, and of course, dressage is part of their competition. So we focus on that a lot, but the, foundation of their jumping success, even when they're going cross country, is still based in the basics, the flat work, the straightness, the ability to affect the horse's balance, the ability to impact how the horse uses itself, and that overall, ability to focus the horse and create enough positive tension that the horse can, perform as an athlete while minimizing the negative tension, so the horse can be relaxed and focused on their job. So it applies to all disciplines, and it's incredibly fun to see it, intertwined. And I do wish that more interdisciplinary, that riders would look more to dressage for help, but I also would throw it the other way. And I wish that a lot of dressage trainers would be more open to working with other disciplines, because dressage trainers tend to also get very focused on just getting, horses and riders through the levels and getting to the top of the sport. And they lose sight of that piece, that dressage is actually just about making the horse a better athlete altogether. And it doesn't matter what discipline you're really focused on, and that they could offer a lot of help to many disciplines if they were open to it.
I totally agree with what you just said. I was going to ask you, how do you feel, which you just pretty much answered, about trainers helping each other's students, what kind of drawbacks or benefits do you see? And not just disciplines, but even within our own, your own discipline or our own. It's so easy to get into this idea. And I think this comes down to how the business runs. One rider is a client of one trainer, and they might have multiple trainers in the barn, but there's usually a head trainer, and everybody, has that one philosophy in that barn. And there's so much to be learned from having a different perspective. I'm really learning that myself with teaching clinics when I'm traveling to these different barns, and, they're so welcoming to have someone that's coming in with a just a fresh outside look that can give the students and the horses a little something new to work on, something, the students here. Obviously, we all do flat work, right? We all in any discipline, we're all trying to do those basics, but it's how you say it and how refined and specialized you are in your area of that, and how much more can you bring to the student that I'm teaching, Christina, being this particular one. So I agree. I do wish that trainers would be more open to helping each other's students. Some very much are. I think that students and horses would really benefit from doing more of that. And have you ever run into situations where students of your own you've encouraged to have outside riders or outside trainers help them?
I encourage my students to ride with as many different good trainers as they can. I mean, there's always the danger.
That's so cool.
When I recommend that they go, ride with another trainer, that trainer may not have the same philosophy, may not prioritize the horse's mental and physical well-being, and may push them too hard. So I do, try to make sure that who they're riding with is someone that's pretty reputable, that I know isn't going to cause them a setback that we'll have to work on. But that's pretty rare that a training session would go badly. But I do try to make sure that I send them towards good, positive interactions. But I encourage all my students to ride with as many different people. I encourage them to work with a groundwork person that does a lot of like liberty work and natural horsemanship, because it just helps build their relationship so much. And that stuff also carries over under saddle. And whenever there are clinicians, I try to really set the example. I try to ride with a lot of different clinicians, and I try to push my students to as well. And if they're riding with a clinician, I work really hard to try to watch, because, not only can my students learn something, but a lot of times I can learn a lot from my students riding with someone else. They either come back from their clinic and they're like, hey, I did this great exercise and it helped my horse so much. And they explain it. And then I use it on a horse the next day. And I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. I can't believe I've never tried that before. Or they come back and they say, oh, she said this. And I'm like, okay, how many thousands of times have I said that before? She's like, oh, but she said it just this way and it just clicked. And I know you've said it a bunch of times. So it's just really beneficial, and a fresh set of eyes. Horses, in theory, this shouldn't be very complicated, but horses are complicated creatures. And so just getting that fresh set of eyes, you never know what trainer has experienced a horse that's similar to that horse that can really offer a lot of insight. And I've even enjoy riding, with riders from other disciplines on even my own horses, just having fun. I cross-train my horses. My horses all know how to jump. I'm not a brave jumper, so I can't say that they jump well, but I think it's, very beneficial for them to have fun. I do tons of cavaletti work and pole work as well. It keeps the horses really fresh and happy. But I've been amazed when I've been riding, with 100 jumpers, maybe not even trainers, just amateur riders. And we're just riding together, because I have the luxury of boarding my personal horses at the winter at the farm where Christina is. So I get to ride with all sorts of disciplines. And, sometimes I'll be like, oh gosh, we'll be cooling out talking. And I'll be like, I'm just having this issue. And it's really frustrating that we're, working on, X, Y, or Z. And one of them will go, oh, well, she does look like she's really on the forehand. And I'm like, duh, So,
yeah,
like sometimes we, stepping out of your discipline and having that fresh set of eyes can really bring the big picture back into reality, where we get so focused on all the little details all the time that it's just that it can be priceless.
Yeah, no, I love the way you put that. And the idea of, right, a fresh set of eyes can come in so many forms, from a different rider, a different trainer. And I think so much a part of that is, sometimes it's that lack of of any prior knowledge or history with a horse or with a rider of sort of, oh, I know, you always do this, or this is what this horse, kind of does. And when you come in, not knowing any of that, sometimes it allows you to see them a little bit more as a blank slate, and then maybe see them in a different way that somebody who knows that horse very well, or has ridden that horse, or knows that rider very well, would have much a harder time seeing sort of through their preconceptions of how much they already know about that horse or rider. So yeah, I agree, and I like that idea a lot. Do you find that your training technique changes when you train outside, people who don't have a dressage background, or is it really more kind of individualistic for, with whoever you're training that day?
I would say it's pretty individual for all of my riders. I think what I really enjoy, a big piece of what I enjoy for the riders outside my discipline, is that we can really just focus on whatever is going to make that horse physically and mentally perform at its best, and help that rider to really understand how to bring out that horse's best. And I don't need to worry about also making sure that, everything is perfect for that horse to go in the show ring next week, in the dressage ring, because, as much as I would say my training overall, I really try not to think about just competing, but when a horse and a rider are getting ready to go to a competition or go to regionals or something, I mean, there is a lot of riding through pieces of the test, riding through certain movements, and that's the stuff that, I want the movements to make the horse a better horse for the sake of the horse, not necessarily to make the test score better. So I really try not to teach too much to the competition mindset, more to the betterment of the horse and the rider overall. But when I'm teaching in other disciplines where I know they're not about to go, down center line to do a dressage test, then it's really quite fun to be able to just, work on what they really need as a partnership. And then I have some dressage riders that have no plans of ever competing. And that's also fun because I just don't have to worry about, we call it the ring craft, where, you're not only are you training to progress the horse and rider and training the movements, but you're also training the ring craft aspect, where you're making sure that they can perform at their absolute best to get every point that they can out of their dressage test. And that to me is a little bit like when I was teaching high school, and it was like teaching to the test, where, I had a basic idea of what things would be on the Regents exams. And so, there were times that I was teaching just to make sure the kids would score well on the Regents exam, but it didn't mean they understood the material. So I like the aspect of being able to just work for the betterment of the education of the horse and the rider, and not have to do that teaching to the test thing.
Yeah, it's so nice to not always have the end result in mind, isn't it? And I think about Christina's horse that you and I have worked with that we keep referencing, and to use her as an example, she isn't looking to go in the show ring on a, weekly basis or anything. She's hoping to get a few shows in over the summer. And her horse, as you saw, was or is working on getting onto his hind end and getting off his front end, which probably is the basics of all riding we should be working on, right? But her horse really has to handle himself behavior-wise in a proper way in order for her to do that. And what I work on her with is, or what I work with her on is how to land from a jump and settle back down into the flat work. And since she wasn't jumping with you in your lesson, can you give our listeners some exercises that you gave Christina in order to, I would love for them to hear your approach on how you got that into her riding a little bit stronger, because the next time that I gave her a lesson, her horse was significantly better at that. So I learned a lot on how just the basics of what you're teaching can help us when I'm dealing with what to do on the landing of a jump.
Yeah, it's going to sound ridiculously simple, but we work on straight.
But that's great. That's what we want, right? Simple and basic. That's what
it is.
That's what we're all working for.
It's always basics. And so with her horse, I totally agree. I watched her warm up, walk, track, canter, and her horse wanted to definitely, take the balance towards the forehand and not really engage and use his hind end. But in watching them, he wasn't engaging his hind end because he was often throwing his haunches in and crooked. And so one of the big things I work on with all my riders is really being able to get that horse straight, because once they're straight, you kind of plugged all the escape holes around their body that energy may be leaking out of, so that you can start to get them to engage onto their hind legs. And one exercise that we did with Christina and her horse that I do with a lot of riders, I do it with my own horses probably multiple rides a week, is just cantering off the rail and trying to canter in perfectly straight lines. Because when you come off the rail, suddenly your outside aids have to influence the outside of the horse's body, and the rail isn't artificially doing it for you. And then their natural crookedness will really start to show up. So if you just canter 5 feet off the rail and pick a fence post or, a beam in the indoor or something to canter towards, and if you have mirrors, that's even better. And you canter straight towards it and feel or look in the mirror and see, is your horse truly straight? Is their nose in the middle of their chest, and then are their shoulders lined up directly in front of their haunches, or are their haunches in or out or swinging both ways? And so we did a lot of cantering the inner track or the quarter lines just to get that horse really straight. And once he was straight in his body alignment, then we also said, okay, now let's add some bend in the turn before you go back to your next straight line so that he can become more supple. But just finding that straightness helped him find his hind legs. And then the engagement kind of happened without really having to drill it or get him mad. He just had to get himself lined up in a position that he could be engaged.
Yeah. And that's all it is, right? It's just engagement. And we're not looking for any specific lateral movements or anything. I certainly try to teach that in a lot of my lessons, but I end up just talking about straightness so much. And it's so helpful to have, just a different way of training that we get especially as hunter jumper riders. I think that we get caught up in the ease of staying outside the rail, right? We just kind of go around in circles to warm our horse up because we're focused on the jumping part. And again, the flat work is important, but we can get into the habit of skipping through it or over it at time to time. Or, when I walk out and we're all a little bit not in a hurry, but we're saying, okay, are you ready to jump? It's so easy to forget how those specifics prepare us to jump. And that's the whole point of the lessons that I give, at least. And so, I do say, okay, canter off the rail, but the specifics of having that post to look at, there's something I'm learning, of how to help that, because it's just habit. Where you're used to putting your horse is where your horse goes. And that's where their weaknesses come out.
Yeah, no, and it makes me think of, my equitation horse, who we used to call Gumby, right? And you talk about straightness, and, you had an animal that was so flexible through his entire body that he could be anywhere or 3 places at once, right? If you let him. And, and it was, if you got to that place of straightness and did the work and did the homework, if you will, of putting him together and in the box and in a straight line, you could then put him anywhere you wanted. But if you didn't do that homework, he would put himself anywhere he wanted, and very, very elegantly so. And so it was really, you had to start from that, even if the end goal isn't straightness, is that flexibility and is that mobility. If you don't start from that straight, sort of contained, kind of closing off those escape routes place, you're in for trouble, dressage or jumping or otherwise, I suspect.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think in the dressage world, we're just as guilty of skipping those basics, because our horse is learning how to half pass and how to do tempi changes. And so we kind of let some of the basics go as well and then focus on the tricks. But if the basics fall apart, tricks fall apart too. So it's so important. So the other thing that I had Christina work on, we still were just working on the straightness and the alignment and the engagement. was just repetitive transitions, kind of rapid fire transitions, because those are the moments that the horse is going to lose their balance, lose the engagement, fall on the forehand, and or get crooked. And so it's just a repetitive way to magnify the problems so that they're really apparent. So every single transition, if that horse always wants to be crooked and fall left, well, they're going to fall left a lot every time you do a transition. So if you're suddenly having to do a transition, every 20 meters or something, then it's a lot of opportunity to realize, oh, my horse gets crooked in this way. And if I straighten him this way, then the transitions are more fluid. My horse is more balanced, my horse is more engaged, and then everything gets easy. So tons of transitions. One exercise I love that all riders do is if you have dressage letters set up, the letters are spaced out anywhere from, 12 or 14 meters apart. And I just tell them, you have to do some sort of transition every time you go past the letter. Every single letter you need to do a transition. And, that gives them 12 chances per lap of the arena to do transitions. And, I say you need to do 100 transitions every ride. So if you can do 12 transitions every lap of the ring, then you hit your 100 transitions in your warm up. And then your horse is on your age and engaged and balanced and aligned to where you can go do anything you want after you're warmed up. So we also did a lot of transitions, but still just focusing on straightness to get the engagement and, the more uphill balance and, more mobile shoulders to allow Christina's horse to be able to, then go do his job over fences.
I am using that in my next lesson. I love that. That number of transitions
really
it sounds, even to me now I'm thinking about doing it myself, thinking, wow, that forces you to do it quickly and keep your brain ahead of you in terms of what you're asking your horse to do. That's fantastic.
It's a lot of fun. And I tell them, it doesn't have to be a clear transition between gates. You don't always have to go walk to trot, trot to canter, canter to walk, walk to halt. You can also go like lengthen the trot, shrink the trot, lengthen the canter, shrink the canter. And just really vary it so that every 12 meters or so, you are asking your horse to change something. And if they have to change something that frequently, they have to adjust their balance to make that happen. Or every 12 meters, they're falling on their face.
That's wonderful. I literally am blown away about the fact that I'm learning something just from talking to you.
Okay, that was great. I loved all of that. More of an open-ended question. Just really, do you have, looking back, kind of a favorite moment, a favorite memory, a favorite learning experience that you have either with a horse or a rider?
Oh my goodness.
You're on the spot now.
Yeah, I'm on the spot. And you know what? Like, I'm in this sport, busting my butt, working so hard because of all those moments. And there's so many of them. And if there weren't so many of them, I wouldn't keep doing this because it's a lot of work. I would say probably one of my absolute favorite moments would be my first ride in my Fat Belly doing a FEI ride, my first pre-St. George, which was actually kind of an abysmal ride, as to be expected. Most people's first, pre-St. George, or even just stepping up a level, tends to not be overly polished. But it just was kind of the culmination for me of all the hard work really finally paying off. Like, I felt like I may actually make it in this sport. And also feeling like, as I rode through that pre-St. George, I was like, I finally, all this hard work is finally paying off. Also just feeling so addicted to the fact that there was so much more to learn. I think that was one of the biggest things I came out of that ride appreciating, was that I had come so far and I was nowhere near done. And that's the most beautiful thing about the sport for me, and horses in general, is that, you just never stop learning. And every time you start to feel like you're learning something, it just opens up new doors for even more, nuances to learn. So I think that was probably one of my biggest memory.
Do you like riding or teaching better? No wrong answer.
Oh,
I know we're talking about teaching, but that sounded,
that's a
you
hard
got a little
question.
emotional when you started talking about riding there, and I can feel that. That's great.
That's a really hard question. It's actually a question I ask myself all the time. And I think my question or my answer to that question would vary day to day. I absolutely love riding. I love bringing along, especially like problematic horses and helping figure them out and helping them find confidence and comfort in their bodies and helping them learn to love a job that maybe they have not been loving. So the riding for me is incredibly rewarding and I absolutely love that. But there are also so many days that I'm like, gosh, I just love teaching because those moments that you see your students have these big light bulbs go off, it's absolutely astonishing to watch and to be a part of that and feel like you've made such a big difference. And, even seeing my riders at low levels that work super, super hard and, go out and, win their first blue ribbon, training level, it can be so incredibly rewarding. So I think it's a dead on tie for me. I love both of them.
That will make you continue and make it in this world. That's for sure. When you say you made it in the ring, it's also so when you can have those rewarding moments and teaching does bring that to you. I mean, that's why I'm still doing it I've had a lot of showing experience and a lot of moments where I say I am so, the achievement, not even just the ribbon, but the hard work you put into being a rider and accomplishing something that's so technical and hard. And we talk about it being simple, but it is not easy one bit. But if that can also give you the same feeling, if teaching can give you the same idea of feeling that way, I just think you'll be a lifelong horse person. That's for sure.
Recharge your training program with Equestrian Plus. Equestrian Plus brings together top riders, trainers, and professionals onto one video platform. Watch over 5,000 how-to training videos, clinic and event footage, exclusive training sessions, and more featuring top experts including 5-time dressage Olympian Stefan Peters, 5-time Olympic show jumper Ann Krasinski, Olympic eventer and silver medalist William Fox Pitt, and more. Join Equestrian Plus now and use promo code HRN15 for 15% off your first month. Visit equestrianplusplus.com to subscribe.
I would love to close with a question from one of my listeners who texted me earlier today when I told them I was doing a podcast with a dressage trainer, and she asks about what exercises can I do at home on my own to help my horse learn to do a lead change. And so her horse is 7 years old and he's off the track, and I'm helping her. And it's just been one of those where he's any thoroughbred off the track. Obviously we're a little bit behind the normal route, I should say, of, they've started on the track, right? And then we're retraining them. So this is a horse that does lead changes probably 60% of the time well, but is still learning. So doesn't really understand how to take his time through them and what to do when he can't catch up. And I get to help her, a couple of times a week, but I don't get to see her every day. So can you give her any exercises she can do at home to help, even just the in-betweens of lessons, or even give her something that I can help her do to teach her horse to do some lead changes a little cleaner?
Yeah. So for me, basically, the quality of the flying change has two big components for it. And it's the quality of the canter overall. So is the horse straight in the canter? Again, we go back to the basics. Are they straight? If they're straight, then they can be engaged and start to be more uphill. So they have a little more suspension and air time, which becomes very important when either you need air time to get over a jump, or you just need enough air time to be up in the air long enough to rearrange the legs and land on a lead in a flying change. So I'm looking for canter quality. And then I'm looking for the quality of the canter transition. So both walk to canter or trot to canter, does that horse really crisply, promptly, and in a relaxed way step into the canter from walk or trot whenever I ask for it. So I would do lots of straightness. I would ride those inner tracks on the quarter lines and, pick the fence posts and make sure the horse can canter really straight both directions. And then I would make sure that the horse can do that same exercise. Like I'll even set up like a rectangle and I'll put just a cone at the corner of each quarter line so that they're kind of doing a square turn around the cone and then going straight down the quarter line, making sure the horse is really straight. And if they can ride that rectangle with straightness, then can they ride that rectangle and throw in 5 or 6 transitions, walk canter or trot canter, and still keep the horse straight. Mm-hmm. And once that is achieved, then I would say one of my favorite just overall exercises for working on changes is to ride a figure 8, but smaller circles, like 10-meter canter circles. And I'll actually place them at the end of the arena so that as I come out of the corner, I'm doing a half 10-meter circle back around to center line and riding straight towards the wall.
Yep.
And then as the horse is straight towards the wall, I'll ask for the flying change because the wall kind of naturally half helps them back just a little bit so they don't go running off and get crooked and frantic in the flying change. And then we're coming right into the next corner and I'm doing a half 10-meter circle and coming back around up center line facing the short side. And then I'll ask for the change back, or I will question them and be like, oh, actually, no, let's keep circling this way a couple of times so that they don't anticipate the change every time they come around. But it really comes down to the straightness, the quality of the canter, and then those transitions. Like if I'm looking for the horses to check those boxes for me when I'm asking for flying changes. And if something goes wrong in the flying change, I can usually dissect it back to, okay, well, that horse was late to my aid when I asked for the change, but he also was late to my aid for 2 or 3 strides when I asked for him to pick up the canter in my warm-up. So I could have fixed it there in my warm-up.
Yep.
Or the horse got really crooked in the change. That's, those are the 2 things that usually go really badly. And if they get crooked, then they lose their balance. They fall on the forehand. They lose the engagement. Everything falls apart. So, I'm looking for, can I keep them straight? And can I keep them straight in transitions? And can I make those transitions really crisp and right on the aid, right at the second that I ask? Because you only have that split second of suspension when the horse is in the air to ask for the flying change, to have them actually rearrange their legs and land on the other lead. So they can't take 3 strides to think about it. So if they're taking 3 strides to think about your canter depart in your warm-up, then they're not thinking quick enough to make a flying change in that split second of suspension in their canter stride.
Right. Yes, we as hunter people or hunter jumper people, we tend to teach the flying change across the diagonal in a longer approach. But if the horse is getting upset over it or nervous about it, it can really result in, you don't have a barrier to slow down into. And then you end up rushing the turn and you end up teaching them that across the diagonal might mean a lead change. So I like that.
And then they end up every time you go across the diagonal, they're like, okay, run as fast as I can.
Yeah.
And make a change and then, be all off balance in the next corner.
Exactly.
And once they master the change on those circles, then I'll go like short diagonal so that it's not as long of a space where the horse can get running. And then once they've mastered that, then I might even, I like to teach my horses counter canter when I'm teaching changes to really confirm that they're on the aid. And so I might ride them on the inner track, like on that same rectangle that we talked about. And I might do a change that straight line of the quarter line or the inner track, and then hold counter canter for the short side, and then ask them to change back on the next long side. Or, change right a corner, then change on the short side. And so I mix it up to where the changes become kind of a normal everyday thing I might ask for them anytime, anywhere. And the horse needs to be balanced and ready to do them, just like they need to be balanced and ready to do a transition anytime.
Well, what I love is that you and I come from totally different disciplines and we still come to the same result, right? We're still talking about balance. We're still talking about straightness. We're still talking about the track that the horse is on. And it's so awesome to be able to, combine backgrounds in order to create a better result for the horse. And I think that's what trainers and riders should hope to, to get out of these cross disciplines, because we're all trying to create the best environment for the horse and the best way of asking for what we want, right? To get the best result, whether you're doing a dressage test or, trying to canter around a Grand Prix show jumping course. So your philosophy is just something I really can connect to. And I love that. So thank you so much for, first of all, helping Christina. That was the first part of this. And I think we got to give a shout out to her since she's the one that put this together and connected the two of us.
Yeah. Thank you, Christina, for connecting us. And, it's really fascinating to see how the training philosophies from two completely different disciplines can be so similar. And we could talk for hours about this stuff and pick each other's brains about how you handle different things. And it's really fascinating. That's, the sport is so addicting because you just never stop learning.
You never stop learning. Well, maybe since we both do work out of the same barn, which for our listeners, again, we've never met. This is our first conversation. We're just, collaborating on this one horse at the time, but I would love to do that with more horses. And again, your dressage clients aren't certainly looking to jump around a course, but adding to their education from any perspective. I would, maybe we'll do a joint clinic or something one day over there. That would be fun.
I would love to collaborate. And I do actually encourage all of my dressage riders to cross train their horses. I can't say that all of them take me up on it,
right.
But some of them do. And the ones that do, I do advise them to get instruction for, if you are going to jump your horse, make sure you're not jumping them in an unbalanced way and undoing all of the flat work and, solid basics that we work on all the time. So I would love to collaborate with you, with the students that do cross train. And I would love to actually have you watch my own horses go because I cross train them, and I would love to know that I'm not messing them up either.
Well, that's also another thing, right? You're getting confirmation from someone else that goes, yeah, I think you're on the right track. This is looking pretty good. So I think any collaboration is awesome. So I would be happy to. I would love to do something together. So thanks, Christina, for introducing us via the podcast. That's so cool. Well, Krystal, thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate it. I look forward to meeting you in person. I actually am off to give Christina a lesson right now. This is Monday afternoon. This pod will be posted in a few days, but I'm going to go tell her all about our conversation. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Show Jumping Podcast. Please be sure to join our Facebook group, Overheard on the Show Jumping Podcast, and submit your questions there. Keep your eyes up and your heels down.